The air crackled, not with lightning, but with raw power, the kind of power that could reshape worlds, that could tear apart the very fabric of reality. It was a power that had been dormant for too long, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Jesus stood before the pearly gates, face a mask of cold fury. His eyes, usually filled with compassion and understanding, now burned with an intensity that could melt steel. The gates, symbols of divine peace and eternal rest, seemed to tremble under his gaze. Gone was the meek carpenter, the gentle healer. In his place stood a warrior, a force of nature, a being of pure, unadulterated wrath. His hands, once used to heal the sick and comfort the weary, now clenched into fists of righteous anger. This was the Son of God, and he was here for vengeance. Vengeance for the countless lives lost, for the innocent blood spilled in his name. He was here to set things right, to bring justice to a world that had forgotten what it meant to be just. He'd felt it slither down from the mortal realm, a tendril of malice that wrapped around his heart, squeezing tight. It was a darkness that had no place in the heavens, a corruption that had seeped into the very essence of humanity. It whispered of betrayal, of agony, of a sacrifice made meaningless. It spoke of Rome, of the cross, of the nails that had pierced his flesh, the thorns that had crowned his head. It was a reminder of the pain he had endured, and the purpose of that pain. He was supposed to die for their sins, to offer redemption, to be the bridge between humanity and the divine. But what had become of that sacrifice? What had humanity done with the gift of salvation? But what good was redemption when they continued to spill innocent blood in his name? When wars were waged and lives were destroyed, all under the banner of a twisted interpretation of his teachings? It was a perversion of everything he stood for. What kind of father allowed such horrors to continue, unanswered? What kind of divine plan permitted such suffering and injustice? These were questions that had plagued him, that had gnawed at his soul. He slammed his fist against the gate, the sound echoing through the celestial city. It was a sound that demanded attention, that called for action. It was a declaration of his intent, a signal that he would no longer stand idly by. His voice when he spoke was like thunder. It rolled through the heavens, shaking the very foundations of paradise. It was a voice that could not be ignored, that demanded to be heard.
Father, we need to talk. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of millennia of suffering and unanswered prayers. It was a call to the Almighty, a plea for understanding, a demand for justice. The heavens seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the response that would shape the fate of both the divine and the mortal realms.
The throne room shimmered, an expanse of white and gold. The air was thick with an aura of divinity, a place where mortal concerns seemed distant and insignificant. Yet today, the atmosphere was heavy with an unspoken tension. God sat upon his throne, his face etched with concern. His eyes, usually filled with omniscient calm, now reflected a deep, almost human worry. He was a being of immense power, yet before him stood his son, radiating an equally potent but different energy. This energy was raw, untamed, and filled with a palpable rage that seemed to crackle in the air, an energy born of rage. The son's eyes blazed with a fire that spoke of countless injustices, of a world that had strayed far from the path he had once tried to illuminate.
My son, what troubles you so? Your heart is heavy and your spirit is restless. Speak to me and let us find a way to ease your burden. Troubles me? They torture and kill in my name. They twist my teachings into weapons of hate and destruction. How can I remain silent when my message of love has been so perverted? My sacrifice, your grand plan, it means nothing. They learned nothing. Instead of peace, they have sown chaos. Instead of love, they have spread fear. What was the point of my suffering if this is the result?
God rose from his throne, his expression pained. He moved with a grace that belied his age, each step a testament to his eternal nature. Yet, there was a heaviness in his movements, a reflection of the sorrow in his heart.
Their ways are not your concern, my son. Mortals are flawed, and their journey is fraught with missteps. Your role was to guide, not to control. You planted the seed. It is up to them to nurture it. You fulfilled your purpose, brought salvation to... Salvation? What good is salvation when they drown the world in blood? Look at the world, Father. It is a place of suffering and despair. How can you call this salvation? I should have brought fire, not peace. Perhaps then they would have understood the gravity of their actions. Perhaps then they would have feared the consequences of their hatred. God looked at his son, his heart heavy with the weight of his words. He knew the pain his son felt, the disillusionment that had taken root in his heart. But he also knew that the path of mortals was one they had to walk themselves. "My son, the world is not perfect, and it may never be. But your sacrifice was not in vain. It gave them a chance, a hope for a better future. It is up to them to seize it." The son looked at his father, his anger slowly giving way to a deep, aching sadness. He wanted to believe his father's words, to find solace in the idea that his suffering had not been for nothing. But the weight of the world's pain was a heavy burden to bear. God stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "You have done more than you know, my son. Your light still shines, even in the darkest of times. Trust in that light and trust in the journey of those you sought to save." In that moment, the son felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps in time the world would change. Perhaps his sacrifice would not be in vain. And for now, that small glimmer of hope was enough.
The clang of metal on metal split the air. Michael, the warrior angel, blocked Jesus' path, sword of holy fire drawn.
"Stand down, brother, this is madness."
But Jesus was beyond reason. He struck, his blow a whirlwind of divine fury. Michael parried, but the force sent him staggering back. Other angels, their faces etched with fear and confusion, drew their own weapons, forming a shimmering, hesitant line. "This is not your fight. Turn back from this path, Jesus. There is still hope for peace."
Peace? You think there can be peace after what they've done? After what he allowed?
He gestured towards God, his face contorted in a mask of bitter betrayal. The whispers started subtly, like a faint breeze rustling through the leaves of a dark forest. They were almost imperceptible at first, a mere undercurrent in the cacophony of the celestial battle that raged around him. Amidst the clash of swords and the cries of angels, there was a darker, more insidious presence. It was a whisper that seemed to come from the shadows themselves, a voice that slithered into the ears of Jesus, promising power and dominion. They slithered into Jesus' ears, promising power, offering a way to unleash his righteous fury. The voice was seductive, weaving a tapestry of promises that seemed to offer a solution to all his pain and suffering. It spoke of a throne, not beside the Father but in place of him, a throne that would grant him the power to rule over all creation, to bring justice and order to a world that had betrayed him. They spoke of a throne, not beside the Father but in place of him. Satan's voice was a serpent's hiss, filled with the promise of ultimate power and control. But with that promise came a price. To sit on that throne, Jesus would have to embrace the darkness, to become the very thing he had fought against. The whispers were relentless, gnawing at his resolve, planting seeds of doubt and anger. Even here, in the heart of heaven, his influence wormed its way through the cracks of doubt and rage. The whispers were a constant presence, a dark shadow that loomed over him, tempting him with visions of power and vengeance. His influence wormed its way through the cracks of doubt and rage. The whispers were like dark tendrils spreading through his mind, wrapping around his thoughts and emotions, trying to pull him into the abyss. He was the master of temptation, and he sensed an opportunity in Jesus' pain. The serpent's voice was a constant reminder of the suffering he had endured, the betrayal and the mockery, and he sensed an opportunity in Jesus' pain. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the serpent could sense the turmoil within him. It was a battle of wills, a struggle between light and darkness, between hope and despair.
"They took everything from you. They mocked you, humiliated you, and cast you aside." The voice was filled with venom, each word a dagger aimed at his heart. "Betrayed you, murdered you." The memories of his suffering were like open wounds, raw and painful. The voice exploited these wounds, using them to fuel his anger and resentment. Why should they be allowed to continue their wicked ways? The question echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the injustice he had faced. The voice offered a solution, a way to end the suffering and bring true justice to the world. Take what is rightfully yours. The voice was a siren's call, tempting him with visions of power and glory. It promised him the world, if only he would embrace the darkness, rule in your Father's place, and bring true justice to the world. The voice was relentless, its whispers a constant presence in his mind. It promised him everything he had ever wanted, if only he would give in to the darkness and bring true justice to the world. The voice was a seductive whisper, promising him the power to right the wrongs of the world, to bring order to the chaos.
Jesus faltered, his anger momentarily forgotten as he grappled with the seductive whispers, with the tempting darkness that mirrored his own pain. It was a moment of weakness, a brief lapse in his resolve, with the tempting darkness that mirrored his own pain. The whispers were a reflection of his own inner turmoil, a dark mirror that showed him the path of vengeance and power. Could this be the answer? The question lingered in his mind, a constant presence that gnawed at his resolve. The whispers promised him everything he had ever wanted, if only he would embrace the darkness. Could this be the way to finally right the wrongs of the world? The whispers were a constant presence, a dark shadow that loomed over him, tempting him with visions of power and vengeance. But deep down he knew that the path of darkness was not the answer. It was a battle of wills, a struggle between light and darkness, between hope and despair. And in that moment, Jesus made his choice. He chose to stand against the darkness, to embrace the light, and to bring true justice to the world.